If your Social Security check hasn't gone up since early 2025 and you worked a public job or your late spouse did, there could be a check for more than $22,000 sitting in a system that will never mail it to you on its own. Quick heads up before we dig in. This is general information and not personal advice, since every SSA record is a little different. Now let's get into exactly who this is for, because it's a shorter list than you'd think. But if you're on it, this could be the most important 8 minutes you spend this month. Here's the situation. About a year and a half ago, Congress passed something called the Social Security Fairness Act. And if you worked as a teacher, a firefighter, a police officer, or any state, local, or federal job that didn't take Social Security taxes out of your paycheck, you probably heard the headline. A rule that had quietly shrunk or wiped out benefits for millions of people got repealed. And the Social Security Administration started sending out checks. Big checks in a lot of cases. And if you're one of the people who got a letter and a deposit, congratulations. That part of your story is done. But here's what nobody's telling you on the news anymore, because the story stopped being interesting to reporters the day the big wave of payments went out. Not everyone got their money. Not everyone who was owed a correction has one. And the group most likely to still be waiting, the group that could be owed the most, the widows and widowers whose survivor benefit was completely erased years ago, often have no idea they're supposed to do anything at all, because as far as they know, they were never even in the system to begin with. So today I want to walk you through exactly who this law touches, the specific ways people are still falling through the cracks in 2026, and the precise steps to check whether your money already came or whether it's still sitting there waiting on you to go get it. I want to be upfront about something before we go further, because I think it actually makes this video more useful, not less. The Social Security Administration has done a genuinely good job here. This wasn't a broken promise or a scandal. Millions of people got paid, and a lot of them got paid faster than the agency originally told them to expect. So this isn't a video about the government failing you. It's a video about the small, specific group of people who fall outside a big, mostly successful rollout. Because in any process that touches 3 million plus records, some percentage is always going to be the complicated cases, the ones that don't fit the automated template. If you're one of those complicated cases, nobody is coming to tap you on the shoulder. You have to go find out for yourself. And that's what the rest of this video is going to walk you through, step by step. Let me tell you where this comes from, so you know it's not a rumor or a chain email your neighbor forwarded you. The Social Security Fairness Act was signed into law on January 5th, 2025. It eliminated two rules that had been on the books since the early 1980s, known as the Windfall Elimination Provision and the Government Pension Offset. Those two rules reduced or completely erased Social Security benefits for people who also collected a pension from a job that hadn't paid into Social Security. Think teachers in certain states, firefighters, police officers, and federal workers under the old civil service retirement system. The Social Security Administration has publicly confirmed it processed more than 3 million payments, totaling well over $17 billion, and it originally set a goal to have every affected record updated by early November of 2025. By its own numbers, the agency got the vast majority done, somewhere north of 90%. That's genuinely good news. But even the agency itself has acknowledged that a share of cases, the ones with complicated work histories or unfiled applications, are still being sorted out manually, case by case, well into 2026. That gap between done and almost done is where real money is still sitting unclaimed. And it's exactly what we're going to cover. It also helps to understand why this rule existed in the first place, because it explains why fixing it turned into such a massive undertaking. Back in the early 1980s, lawmakers were worried about a specific quirk in how Social Security benefits get calculated. The formula was originally designed to replace a bigger share of income for lower earners, on the assumption that if your recorded Social Security earnings look low, you probably were a lower earner your whole career. But that assumption broke down for people who spent decades in a job that didn't report earnings to Social Security at all, like many teachers and public safety workers. Their Social Security earnings record looked thin, even though they'd had a full, well-paying career, just one paid through a different pension system. So Congress passed the Windfall Elimination Provision to shrink their own benefit, and the Government Pension Offset to shrink or eliminate benefits they might otherwise collect as a spouse or widow. For 4 decades, those two rules quietly reduced or wiped out checks for millions of people, and by the time Congress repealed them in 2025, more than 3.2 million people were affected. That's the scale we're talking about, and it's exactly why the cleanup is still ongoing more than a year later. Before we get into the group still waiting, let's make sure this law actually applies to you in the first place, because if it doesn't, none of the rest of this matters and you can skip ahead. This law is about one specific situation. At some point, you or your spouse worked a job where a pension was paid instead of Social Security taxes. That's the entire trigger. Picture it this way. If you spent 30 years teaching in a state like Texas, Ohio, Illinois, California, or Massachusetts, and Social Security was never deducted from that paycheck, that's the trigger. If you were a firefighter or police officer in a city or county county pension system instead of Social Security, that's the trigger. If you were a federal employee hired before 1984 under the old civil service retirement system, that's the trigger. And if you're a widow or widower whose late spouse worked a full Social Security career, but you personally also collected a government pension of your own, that's the trigger too on the spousal side. If none of that describes you or your spouse, this video isn't about your check, and that's fine. You can go check out something else on this channel. But if that description fits you, even loosely, even from decades ago, stay with me because the next part is where the real money is. Now here's the important reframe for 2026 specifically. A year ago, the honest advice was patience, since the correction was probably still working its way through the pipeline. That advice has expired. We are now well past the point where the automatic bulk part of this process has run its course. If your check hasn't moved and you haven't heard anything, waiting quietly is no longer the smart move. The question isn't, is it coming? The question is, did it already happen? And if not, why not? Let's go through the specific ways people get left behind one at a time with real numbers attached to each one. Number one, the never corrected retiree. This is someone whose monthly Social Security check today, right now, is still calculated the exact same way it was before January 2025. The correction simply never landed on their file. Picture a retired firefighter in Ohio, age 71, who's been collecting a reduced Social Security check for 11 years because of the old rules. If his correction never processed, he's still losing roughly $300 to $400 a month every single month, which adds up to over $4,000 a year he's not getting. The mistake almost everyone in this group makes is assuming silence means nothing's wrong. It doesn't. Silence in this specific case usually means nobody has looked at your file yet. And here's what makes it easy to miss. Your check still shows up on time every month like clockwork. Nothing about the experience of getting paid feels broken. The only thing that's wrong is the number printed on the deposit. And that's not something you'd ever notice unless you go looking for it, because there's no red flag, no bounced payment, no phone call from the agency telling you something's off. Number two, the half-corrected retiree. And this one catches even careful people off guard. This is someone who did get a lump sum deposit, that one-time retroactive payment covering the months going back to January 2024, and understandably assumed that meant everything was fixed. Picture a retired school teacher in Texas, age 68, who got a surprise deposit of around $6,000 in the spring of 2025 and felt like the whole thing was finally resolved. What she may not have checked is whether her ongoing monthly benefit actually increased afterward. In a real number of cases, the one-time payment went out, but the switch to the new, higher monthly amount never got flipped. So she banked the lump sum, felt relief, and has been quietly underpaid every month since without knowing it, because the deposit convinced her the job was finished when it wasn't. Here's a simple gut check you can run yourself. Pull up your bank statement from before 2025 and compare that monthly figure to your most recent deposit. If the only difference you can find is that one-time lump sum and the recurring monthly number is identical, that's the tell. The back pay was real. The ongoing fix wasn't finished. Number three, and this is the one I want you to really sit with if you're a widow or widower. This is the survivor whose benefit wasn't just reduced by the old rules, it was wiped out entirely, all the way to zero. Here's the trap. If your survivor benefit came out to $0 years ago, there was often no reason to file a formal application because Social Security itself would have told you, correctly at the time, that you'd receive nothing. So a lot of widows never submitted paperwork at all. Here's why that matters enormously today. The automatic correction process works by going back through existing approved claims and recalculating them. If you never had an approved claim on file because you never applied, there is nothing for the system to go back and fix. It's not stuck in a queue. It was never entered into the queue in the first place. Picture a widow in Illinois, age 74, whose husband paid into Social Security his entire career, but her survivor benefit was reduced to zero decades ago because of her own teacher's pension. If she never filed, there's no record for the SSA's automatic system to touch. Under the new rules, a fully restored survivor benefit can mean a back payment north of $22,000, plus that full monthly benefit for the rest of her life. And she could be sitting at zero simply because nobody told her the fix requires a brand new application, not a follow-up on an old one. This is, without question, the group I'd most want watching this video because the dollar amounts involved tend to be the largest of any group we're talking about today, and it's also the group least likely to think any of this applies to them since they were told no so long ago that they stopped thinking about it entirely. Now here's where it gets important for a slightly different group. Number four, people who qualified under both old rules but only had one applied. Say a retired police officer in California was affected by both the windfall elimination provision on his own benefit and the government pension offset on a spousal amount he was also entitled to. It's entirely possible one of those got corrected and the other one got missed, especially in more complicated multi-benefit cases. The result looks like a partial win. Some more money is coming in, so it feels resolved, but there's a second second correction sitting undone that nobody flagged for him. The reason this happens comes down to how these cases get processed. A file with one benefit type is simple to automate. A file with two overlapping benefit types, one on his own record and one on a spouse's, often gets kicked out of the automated system and routed to a human reviewer. And human review takes longer and sometimes only catches one issue instead of both. Number 5, most people stop here but don't, because this affects timing, not just amount. If you're a spouse or widow who is filing a brand new application in 2026 because you never had one on file, pay close attention to how far back Social Security will actually pay you. For most spousal and retirement claims, Social Security generally limits retroactive payments to about 6 months before your filing date. Those survivor benefits can sometimes reach back further depending on your specific circumstances. That means every month you wait to file that new application is potentially a month of benefit you simply never recover, even after the whole thing gets sorted out. This is exactly why several senators sent letters to the Social Security Administration in early 2026 pushing for wider retroactivity for people in this exact spot, arguing that many widows and widowers never applied earlier only because the agency itself had told them not to bother under the old rules. As of this recording, that policy question is still being worked out in Washington, which is one more reason not to sit on your hands waiting for it to resolve itself. Filing your application now doesn't cost you anything if the retroactivity rules do eventually get expanded, since your filing date is already locked in. But waiting to file while Congress debates the fine print could genuinely cost you real months of back pay you'll never get returned to you. Number 6, here's the part they never tell you about phone calls to Social Security. Calling and asking a vague question like, "Did I get my money?" often gets you a vague answer because the representative doesn't know which specific system to check. If you call 1-800-772-1213, be precise. Say you want to verify whether your record has been fully updated under the Social Security Fairness Act specifically. And if you're a widow or widower whose benefit was previously reduced to 0, ask directly whether your situation requires filing a brand new survivor benefit application. That specific phrasing routes the representative to the correct history and the correct next step, instead of a generic "you're all set" that may not reflect a case still sitting in the complex manual review pile. If they tell you your file is still pending, write down the date of the call and ask for a case or claim number if one exists, because that gives you something concrete to reference the next time you follow up. Number 7, here's the part almost nobody tells you. This isn't only about your Social Security check, it also touches your Medicare premium. If your windfall elimination provision or government pension offset reduction had you paying your Medicare Part B premium directly out of pocket rather than having it deducted from your Social Security payment, that arrangement doesn't automatically fix itself the moment your correction goes through. The Social Security Administration has said people in that situation should keep paying their Medicare bill exactly as instructed until they receive a formal notice confirming their record has been updated. Skip a payment assuming it'll sort itself out, and you risk a lapse in Medicare coverage over a timing gap that had nothing to do with you. Once your correction is fully processed and your monthly Social Security payment starts, the Medicare premium switches over to being deducted automatically from that check, and any overlap gets sorted out at that point. But that only happens after your record is confirmed updated, not before. Number 8, watch out for how this correction interacts with your taxes. If you received a large lump sum retroactive payment covering more than a year of back pay in a single tax year, that can bump you into a higher tax bracket for that 1 year, or affect things like how much of your Social Security is taxable, or even your Medicare premium surcharge the following year. There's a provision in the tax code that allows you to treat a lump sum Social Security payment as if it had been received in the years it was actually owed, rather than all in the year you received it, which can lower your tax bill in some situations. This isn't something to guess at. If you got a retroactive payment of several $1,000s or more, it's worth specifically asking whoever prepares your taxes whether that lump sum election makes sense for your numbers, because for some retirees, it meaningfully changes what they owe. Number 9, and this is a quieter one that trips people up. If your monthly benefit went up because of this correction, that higher number can push your total income over one of the thresholds that determines your Medicare Part B and Part D premiums the following year, a surcharge often called IRMAA. A retiree whose monthly benefit jumped by $300 or $400 might not think twice about it, but combined with other income, that increase can occasionally nudge someone into a higher premium bracket a year or two later. It's rarely a reason to be upset about getting the correction, since you're still coming out ahead overall, but it's worth knowing about ahead of time instead of being surprised by a Medicare premium letter that seems to come out of nowhere. So here's what I want you to actually do this week. One specific action, not a vague look into it. Go to ssa.gov, sign into or create your personal My Social Security account, and open your official benefit statement. That statement will show your current monthly benefit amount along with a payment history you can scroll back through. Compare your current monthly benefit amount to what you were receiving before early 2025. If that number hasn't moved and you know you or your spouse worked a job affected by these old rules, call 1-800-772-1213 and ask specifically whether your record has been fully updated under the Social Security Fairness Act. Have your Social Security number and, if it applies, your pension documentation ready before you call, since that speeds the representative straight to your file instead of a general lookup. If you're a widow or widower whose survivor benefit was reduced to 0 years ago and you never filed a formal application, ask the representative directly whether you need to submit a new survivor benefit claim, and if so, file it that same week rather than waiting, since every month you delay is a month of retroactive benefit you likely can't recover later. One more thing worth saying plainly: none of this requires paying anyone. There are people online offering to help retirees claim these corrections for a cut of the back payment, and you don't need that. Every step here, checking your account, calling the agency, and filing a new application if you need one, is free and can be done directly through the Social Security Administration itself. If anyone contacts you claiming they can speed up your Social Security Fairness Act payment for a fee, that's a red flag worth hanging up on. If this kind of thing is useful to you, hit subscribe, because this channel exists to catch exactly these gaps between what the headlines say is finished and what's actually sitting in your file. We cover this same kind of thing across Medicare premiums, required minimum distributions, and other retirement rules that quietly change from year to year. So if today's video helped, there's more like it waiting for you here. And if you found this helpful, there's a good chance someone you know, a retired teacher, a former firefighter, a widow who was told years ago she'd get nothing from her husband's record, needs to hear it too. Send it their way. It costs nothing, and for some of you, it could be the reason a check finally moves. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.